They are, to me, borders of self-love. They are seeds to a juicy, optimistic, and bright mind. Hi guys! Welcome to the Open Hearts podcast. It's Marta over here, and here we are for another podcast. Today I will be talking about boundaries. This is something I've been thinking a lot over this week. We've been confined to stay in our homes for now slightly more than 2 weeks in the UK in London. And I think more than ever, I've been thinking about boundaries. Because on a time where we have very little control about what's going on and about what has been imposed to us, I do think we still have control in what surrounds us and what can actually impact not just our minds, but our physical body as well. And that is all about boundaries, to me at least. So boundaries could be seen as limits, according to some perspective, but they are, to me, borders of self-love. They are seeds to a juicy, optimistic, and bright mind. And that's probably my secret for a really positive and optimistic mind. So, how can you actually set those boundaries in your daily life and for yourself? Well, I think first of all, you need to tune in with yourself to find that inner core, that self-identity, to be able to be used to listen, to be really attentive to what's happening and going on inside you. And the more you do that work, that self-knowledge, deep work, constant and really consistent, the more you know and you're used to recognize patterns, you're used to recognize what does sound familiar to you as feelings, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel a bit on the edge, as it happens sometimes, and how much is it too little or too much personal space, and what does it feel good? And so when you're starting to actually create some kind of awareness, with the time you will understand what makes you feel good. And maybe that there is a real sense of personal space, and not just physical but mental, that is really essential to raise that awareness, to create that space, to enhance those kind of thoughts in order for you to build boundaries. So how could you actually apply and how could you create those boundaries? Well, I think boundaries should apply and be created over the many and most varied areas in your life. I would say, first of all, in your personal space. So at home, you have boundaries. You can even have boundaries with your neighbors. So you identify what makes you feel good. You identify what doesn't make you feel good, what doesn't bring you goodness to your day. You identify what words actually triggers you. You know, what words bring you some kind of weird feeling. In your language, in the daily life, what can trigger some more negative feelings. And it could be things like having a habit of weighing yourself in the morning. It could be things on the opposite side of doing a power pose, which I love it in the morning to kind of start your day in a really good place and with that empowerment feeling. So there are little things at home that actually can create and feed and seed a personal, optimistic and amazing boundaries for yourself. And then you have at work, which at the moment, work and home seems to be a completely melted area that is placed together. But that can be actually dedicating an area of your house. And I'm living in a studio. So there isn't much space, but I still create a little area which I identify with a place where I work. So anytime I want to step out from work, I kind of avoid that area. And I create a pattern. Every time I stop working, I do something. And usually it's always the same. I light a candle. I play some that really nice music. Otherwise, you could just kind of create little things that will just set a tone for a healthy boundary. Having a yoga class that you put online. You can decide to not sharing your social media personal accounts with your work colleagues, if that's something that will, for example, trigger any uncertainty or any feelings that you wouldn't like to kind of mix with your personal life and professional life. And talking about social media, boundaries could be created there as well. It's about how many hours you spend there, but as well, which accounts are you following? What are the patterns? Do you usually use social media for inspirational, positive outcoming and, really kind of giving you that little boost? Or do you just scroll up and down when you're tired and bored? Ask yourself that question and maybe reflect just a little bit about it, because you could actually be surprised. And then in your friendships, what's the boundaries you actually created? Do you have the habit of saying yes to everything? Do you actually reflect first on finding out, which part of the day make you feel good in being on your own, in creating little rituals with yourself? And therefore you kind of keep them sacred to you before accepting any friendship commitments? Or do you just put your friends' kind of time first? How do you feel about it? Because sometimes I do reflect about the fact that if I tend to be really kind of so enthusiastic about meeting friends and giving my time to others because I just love people and I love my people, that I sometimes put in a second kind of, I put a priority in all my kind of friends' moment. And sometimes I'm like, I could have been a better company or served them better if I had my, double meditation time this morning, which I haven't because I just wanted to be there for them. So I do think there is this kind of really interesting balance to find what's your boundaries towards yourself and towards the others, because the more you build on that sacred space to you, those rituals, those moments, those healthy thoughts, the more you kind of build that little kind of castle of sand, I would say, but positive sand. I'm just thinking about this golden beach somewhere in the world. I wish I could be there now. But that kind of send of boundaries that you surround yourself with, that bring you goodness, but that actually create a really safe space for you to be, the more you bring out the best of you. And music. Which musics do you have? Which playlists do you have in your phone, in your iPad, whatever technology you use? Do you have anything ready that you actually, put on as soon as you feel like, I really need to feel energized now. I just need to feel like in a chill moment. Do you have that ready? Or do you just, click on what's the best kind of bestsellers of whatever Spotify or brand you have? And what do you surround you by? And I think one of the most kind of important tools to me to create those boundaries when applying them throughout my life has been journaling, meditating, and reflecting loads about the different feelings, the different ways, the different routes you take to show up to others and to yourself. So either it's been on walks, either to me it's when I run or I exercise that I feel maybe it's probably the endorphins. But those endorphins just bring me so much creativity and space for thinking. Otherwise, I'm like, go, 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 which tends to be quite hard. But when you find that little moment of joy, but as well that blissful moment when you actually are just like thinking and things and thoughts are flowing into your mind, you just realize how important and how meaningful some things come to place. And that's when it was so clear to me, boundaries had to be placed little by little to me and by me towards others and towards myself as well. And either you could find, if you feel that meditating, journaling is not something for you and that you're not ready for that, you could start by doing something that puts you in a state of blissfulness. And, that could be walking, running, sewing, reading, breathing in terms of like breath work, really like breathing deeply, like inhaling for 4, pausing for 2, exhaling for 4. You could be yoga. It could be the exercise of like melting a piece of dark chocolate on your tongue and just mindfully eating it. I love that exercise. That's something I definitely want to do in the future with this podcast. Anything that can help you to actually feed that sacred space. So I will leave on the notes of this podcast a few suggestions of elements and exercises you could do to set some boundaries. And I'll leave you with my favorite quote, which I think is very much linked with what we've been talking today, which says, your personal boundaries protect the inner core of your identity and your right to choices. And this is by Gerard Manley Hopkins. And so beyond your physical ID cards, can you define your inner self-identity cards? What's that personal passport? What does define you? I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.